Hello friends, welcome back to my kitchen for another week of what I fed my family. In this week's video, I actually used ChatGPT to make my meal plan again because I was feeling a little uninspired. But I still wanted to feed my family some whole food, homemade recipes. A few weeks ago, I put out a video on how I cheat meal planning, and this is another week of me putting that strategy into practice. So without further ado, let's get into a week of AI recipes that I put to test and also added my own twist to. To start off, we're making a panzanella salad with grilled chicken. I'm using some stale homemade sourdough that I've cut into cubes, and I'm going to toast those in the oven. I drizzled them with olive oil and added a little salt and pepper before popping them in at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes. While those are cooking, I'm getting started on tenderizing my chicken so we can marinate and grill it for dinner. We've been so fortunate here in Michigan to have some unseasonably warm weather for October. It's supposed to reach like 80 degrees. So I'm taking full advantage of the grill, and it may be for the last time this season. I was too lazy to get my tenderizer out today, so I just used my hand to pound the chicken nice and thin. Then I added it to a Ziploc bag and poured in my marinade. I'm using the garlic and herb Lawry's marinade, and I just dumped the whole bottle into the Ziploc bag, squeeze the extra air out, and then pop it into the fridge for the rest of the day. I started this around 2 p.m., so it'll have about 4 hours to marinate, but if you don't have that much time, you'll at least want to give it 30 minutes before you start grilling. The twins are still napping, so I'm getting as much dinner prep done as I can to make the evening less stressful. For the panzanella salad, you'll need tomatoes, cucumbers, red pepper, and herbs. I halved some cherry tomatoes, then cut up about half of a cucumber, and then maybe a quarter cup of red pepper. And finally, I used some fresh basil. I rolled the basil between my hands to release the fragrance and then sliced it really finely before adding it all together. Once everything's combined, I'll drizzle with some good quality olive oil, and I'll sprinkle this with garlic salt, pepper, and Italian seasoning. Then after putting on the lid, I'll give everything a good shake, and that will go in the fridge to marinate while the flavors blend together. My croutons turned out beautifully, nice and golden brown. I'll let those sit out until we're ready to add them into the salad tonight. Now that dinner's prepped, I'm getting started on breakfast for the week. I really enjoyed our breakfast burritos from last week, and I wanted to switch up the filling this time. I'm scrambling the eggs instead of baking them like before. I think that'll give it a better texture, and my daughter is actually helping me today. She's making the egg bake for herself and her brother and sister. She was so excited to help, and honestly, she's gotten pretty skilled at cracking eggs. I'm at the point I don't even have to worry about shells too much anymore. One trick that I use when I'm having my daughter help me is I make her crack an egg into a smaller bowl and make sure there's no shells, and then she can dump it into the bigger bowl. This makes it easier to fish out any shells that do happen to get cracked in. Once the eggs are ready to scramble, I cook them in a preheated stainless steel pan. When they're almost done, I add some fresh spinach and a bit of homemade enchilada sauce. I saw someone do this with breakfast burritos and I had to try it. And oh my goodness, these turned out so good. I actually cooked up a pound of hamburger meat as well and added the leftover enchilada sauce plus some taco seasoning, which you'll see that when I start assembling the burritos. The enchilada sauce really brought everything together. I made 2 batches here, one with regular scrambled eggs for my husband and then one with egg whites for myself. To reheat these, I just pop them in the air fryer for about 7 minutes until they're warm through and a little golden brown on the outside. Now that it's dinner time, the only thing I really have to cook is the chicken. I grilled it until it reached about 165 degrees and then put together the salad with all the veggies. I added my own twist and added some mozzarella pearls. I know traditional panzanella doesn't actually have cheese, but it just sounded right. Then I added the croutons and gave everything a good toss. The flavor really surprised me and it reminded me a lot of bruschetta, and my family really enjoyed this combination. Overall, I was really happy with how this turned out, and the grilled chicken was top notch. I'd recommend serving it with a drizzle of balsamic glaze if you'd like that sort of thing. The next day, I got an early start on snacks for the week. I'm making yogurt in the Instant Pot, super hands-off, but definitely an all-day process. I like to get it going early so it's ready for the fridge by evening. I also started my sourdough sandwich loaf, another all-day recipe. For this, I use 1 1/4 cups of warm water, 3 tablespoons or about 68 grams of honey, 3 1/2 cups of flour, one teaspoon of salt, and about 150 grams of sourdough starter. Then I cut 3 tablespoons of butter into quarters and added those to my bread machine. I set it to dough mode and let it rise until it reaches the top of the pan. For me, this usually takes about 6 to 8 hours. By mid-morning, my milk for the yogurt had come to a boil and had cooled down to 105 degrees. At this point, I can add in my starter culture by mixing it in with some of that warmed milk. Once everything is smooth, I can pour it back into the pot with the remaining warmed milk, and I'll add this back to the Instant Pot and let it sit on my counter for about 8.5 hours to culture. We are cruising along for the day and I'm getting started on a side for breakfast, or this can be used for a pre-workout snack or just a regular snack for the kids. I'm sticking with the fall theme and making apple sheet pan pancakes with a little extra protein. I used my pancake recipe, but made a few tweaks. I mashed up a banana that was about to go bad and then reduced the sugar that I normally add. I also added some cinnamon for those cozy fall vibes and also added some vanilla protein powder. Once everything was mixed, I also added 1 peeled, cored, and chopped apple. After everything is mixed, I'm just going to pour this into a sheet pan that is covered in parchment paper. This will bake for 15 to 20 minutes at 350 degrees. And for some reason, this turned out very cakey, but I was so happy with the flavor of this. My kids devoured it, and honestly, so did I. By midday, my sourdough sandwich loaf was ready to shape, but it was a little wetter than usual. I wasn't exactly sure what had happened here, and I double-checked my footage while editing and noticed that everything was still the same. The only thing that I could come up with was that maybe my sourdough starter was a little too hydrated. I know it wasn't a perfect 1-to-1 ratio of flour to water, but I think this contributed to my dough being a little softer. So to compensate for that, I did add extra flour while shaping. It made it a little trickier, but I decided to trust the process. After shaping and placing it in the loaf pan, I let it rise for a few more hours before baking it after dinner. Today, the fall weather was really creeping in, and I am really leaning into it with this night's recipe. I started by roasting some sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts, and I had a little sous chef helping me. Watching this back while editing made me laugh because of the huge smile on my daughter's face as she placed Brussels sprouts on the baking sheet. It's just such a sweet reminder of how much it means to them to be helping in the kitchen. Once the veggies were cut, I seasoned them with olive oil, salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Then I got started on the chicken. I halved 2 chicken breasts and seasoned both sides with salt and pepper. We're making a pan glaze to go over it, so I didn't want to over season the chicken. I seared each side for about 5 minutes until they were cooked through to 165 degrees. Now for the sauce, which was honestly the highlight of this meal. I didn't measure anything here. I just added olive oil and minced garlic to the pan, then pulled it off the burner so the garlic wouldn't burn. I scraped up the brown bits from the bottom and then added some maple syrup and Dijon mustard, stirring everything together until it came together beautifully. I poured the sauce over the chicken to serve, and it was fantastic. We loved it so much, I ended up making it again later in the week. After dinner, my bread had risen perfectly, and I was feeling much better about it. After baking for about 35 to 40 minutes, it came out beautifully. We've already eaten a good portion of it, but I wanted to show you how the crumb turned out, even though it had a pretty wet dough to start. The next morning, my yogurt was ready. It had set overnight in the fridge. Now it's time to strain it into a thicker Greek-style yogurt. Making yogurt has been such a game changer for me from a financial standpoint. I love Fage yogurt, but it costs $7 for 1 tub. Meanwhile, I can get the same amount using only a half gallon milk, which is closer to $1.69. So huge financial win if you are willing to take the time to learn how to do this. Moving on to tonight's dinner, I'm making cheesy beef orzo. This one's simple, but so delicious. I started by sauteing onions in a seasoned pan. Then added 2 pounds of ground beef and seasoned it with garlic salt and Italian seasoning. I added a can of plain tomato sauce and about 2 cups of beef broth. Once it's all covered in liquid, I stirred in about half a box of orzo. I probably should have used a bigger pan because it filled up fast, but we went with it, and I let it simmer for about 20 minutes covered, stirring occasionally so it didn't stick to the bottom. Once the pasta was cooked through, I added some reduced fat cream cheese and about a half cup of Parmesan. After everything melted together, it was ready to serve, and it was so good. For our last meal of the week, I made vegetable soup. I started with 2 butternut squashes, 2 whole carrots, plus a handful of baby carrots, 1 chopped red pepper, half an onion, and 2 stalks of celery. I covered everything with about 4 cups of chicken stock and about a cup of water. Since the pot was large, it took about 40 minutes to get this boiling and have the vegetables become tender enough to pierce with a fork. Then I used my immersion blender to make it nice and smooth. You could leave this chunky if that's something you like, but my kids definitely wouldn't eat it that way. I also added some salt, pepper, Italian seasoning, oregano, and a bay leaf for flavor. For the last 30 minutes before serving, I stirred in some cooked lentils for extra protein and fiber. To go with it, I made turkey patties using ground turkey, garlic salt, Italian seasoning, and parsley. I shaped the patties and baked them at 400 degrees for about 15 minutes. When everything was ready, I topped the soup with Parmesan and mozzarella cheese and served it with my toasted sourdough. Although this week was full of everyday routines and wasn't anything flashy, I do hope that this video encourages you to find joy in those small rhythms. Thanks for being here and sharing another week in the kitchen with me.